Okay. All right. Can you hear me now? We're going to double check the stream. Hey, if you're one of our friends who's watching, text me. Please text me and let me know that you can hear us now. All right. So, nothing like number one, being late to your own event, and number two, not having any audio. But it looks like we're good to go now. Hey, just to assure you, we spent all day yesterday making sure the technical side of things was working. We did a couple of practice run-throughs. So, who knows? Anyway, thank you for joining us for this live stream to really talk about a very relevant issue to all of us, this homeschooling moment. My name is Brett Kunkle. I'm the founder and president of MAVEN, and I'm going to kind of host this. I want to get out of the way here pretty quickly. I just want to let you know that, number one, here's the format. I'm going to throw out, after I introduce these ladies, I'm going to throw out a couple of questions to get them talking about some really important things, and I'll get out of the way. And then after about 30 minutes of hearing from both Cindy and Erin, I'm going to jump back on with your questions. So as they're dialoguing, if you're watching on YouTube, just type in your questions in the chat box. And if you're watching on our Facebook stream, just type in your questions there. I'll be gathering those questions, and then in about 30 minutes, I'll come back on and pass those questions on to these ladies. Okay, first off, let me introduce Cindy Rollins. Cindy is I think the most important thing about Cindy is she's become a personal friend to us, and she's had a big influence on our family. She is an author. She is a national speaker. She's a veteran homeschooling mom, and she is just she's an amazing person that we've been able to partner with. She spoke at our MAVEN conference last year, and so we're privileged to have her. Most of you who if you know Cindy or if you followed her work, you know the deep wealth of wisdom that she has. Okay. Secondly, let me introduce Erin Kunkle, and I gotta say, this is just my favorite woman in the entire world. My wife of 20, wow, we're going on how many years? 23 years, honey.
Almost, yeah.
Almost 23 years this summer. Erin really helped start MAVEN. She is the sweet voice that you hear on the MAVEN Parent Podcast. She speaks. She's a veteran homeschool mom, and gosh, I have learned a ton from this lady as well. So I'm privileged to have these ladies on together. Okay, here are the three questions, Cindy and Erin, that I want you guys to ask or answer, and just take over this live stream. Here they are. Number one, I want you first to talk about what is education. That's the first question. What is education? Because as we think about homeschooling in the context of education, I think it's really important for people to think about the question, well, what does education mean? What's it entail? What's it envision? Here's the second question. What are your reflections on the changes in education due to the pandemic? What are some of your reflections as you see things changing, as people are having to adjust, as people are having to do some crisis education? And then thirdly, what are some practical tips for parents who find themselves homeschooling, maybe for the first time in this moment? Okay, so those are the three questions. I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Jump right in.
Did you want to mention, sorry, you held up the books before, but we had no sound. So
yeah.
You want to let people know about
While
that?
you're watching Cindy and Erin, if you go to the MAVEN website, it's maventruth.com. We're going to be giving away some of Cindy's books. All you have to do is sign up for our email list, and we will then gather those who sign up for the email list today, and we will pick 4 or 5 winners, and we will send you a resource. Okay, so you can do that while you're watching. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to these ladies.
A great resource. Okay, all right, Cindy, so let's just start with the big, huge question that for us, I think is, oh, thank you. I'll put in my other ear pod. The big question I think that we want to start with in laying the foundation for this conversation, because in the church, I think we've bought into the idea of that education is just what our kids do when they go off to school.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's not a biblical view of education. And so we want to talk about in this opportunity we have where education, the school education, has been disrupted because every school in our country is closed, which is just such a bizarre moment to be in right now.
So weird.
But using this opportunity to really think about as parents, is education just the time that we send our kids to school, or even as homeschool moms, the time that we spend maybe at the kitchen table doing our math lesson or whatever. So if someone were to say to you, well, Cindy, when you think about education, what is education? What would you say to that?
Wow, that is a huge question, and it's a hard question to answer because there's so many misconceptions that you're when you're talking to people, you're not always on talking on the same field.
Hmm.
Uh, what what we really have to start understanding is what is a man or what is a human being. And when we understand that, we understand that education really isn't this big mystery that we have that it requires a system and it requires professionals. These are all the things that we coming through our culture, we've all imbibed this idea that education is something that is done to us from the outside,
Hmm.
when in fact education is really what happens within
Hmm.
us as we learn. So we often think of that, well, what we're going to do is we're going to teach these children, but what we don't understand, and we have teachers and we provide them with all kinds of clues and resources and ideas on how to teach, but none of that really has anything to do with what the person is learning.
Hmm.
And so we have to take away this idea that teaching is learning. And we have to look away from the system, the educational system, and start looking at the human person and say, and ask ourselves, how do human beings really learn? Because a teacher can teach all day, and often if she is teaching all day, she's learning quite a bit herself. Very rarely does that translate over to this whole class having learned everything she taught. Or we give the kids a worksheet
Hmm.
and we have them they spit out what we told them to spit
Hmm.
out. And they can do that. That's a trick and that can be done. Or if they're really smart, they might not want to play that game.
Yeah.
And so they don't fill out the worksheet the proper way. And they don't, and so we judge that as, okay, now you haven't learned anything. But in fact, God has made us to learn. God has made us to desire to learn, to want knowledge, and to gain understanding and wisdom from that knowledge.
Hmm.
So we're not set up to fail. We're really set up to succeed. But when we hit it from that system, and now that so many families are at home, they're trying to plug that system into their home,
Hmm.
and they're thinking it's not working because they're in their home, but really isn't working anywhere. um, so
Yeah, I
so
think I like what you said about, and this was something that I started to think about many years ago, the question of how do kids learn? And that I think is such a pivotal question when we're talking about education. And of course, we're going to talk about it in a really broad sense. We're not talking about just math. We're not talking about just science experiments. We're going to talk about it in the broad sense. But the question of how do children learn seems to be an important question, and now one maybe that parents are thinking about more because they're getting sent home stuff to do, or they're doing Zoom meetings with their their kids are doing Zoom meetings with their teachers in class. So how do kids learn, I think, is an important thing to consider. And both of us are uh, big fans and followers of a lady named Charlotte Mason, and she spent her life really figuring out how do kids learn. And I know both of us have really gleaned so much wisdom in teaching our own kids from her ideas. But maybe unpack that a little bit too, of how do you think kids really do learn?
Right. Well, Charlotte Mason, she had a couple of really wonderful points that kind of explain this. And this was her experience. This was her taking everything she had learned and continued to learn throughout her life and continually looking at children. And basically, she said that her very first point is that children are born persons. So essentially, the way you learn and the way I learn is the way children learn. And we often think, oh, I didn't, this is what I learned in school, but since school, what have I learned? In homeschooling, we talk a lot about lifelong learning. But Charlotte Mason said that children are born persons and that the atmosphere of learning, like for instance, you have an atmosphere I can see right now in your home of learning because you have beautiful spaces that feel conducive to learning. You have lots of books on your bookshelves, and those things are an atmosphere that can produce actually curiosity in children. Because I know when my parents had bookshelves, I was always looking on those bookshelves and reading the books that they had. Some I shouldn't have read, and some I did. But also the idea that education is the science of relations. We get really worried about having a very systematic view of putting it all together. Let's put it all together. Actually, that's what our brains are designed to do. Our brains can take information from various places and begin to put those together. And we don't necessarily have to make all, as a matter of fact, we shouldn't. According to Charlotte Mason, it's not the duty of the teacher to make all the connections for the child. The child is going to make their own connections, and bingo, that's where the learning happens. Mm-hmm. When the child makes a connection, he's made a permanent bit of learning in himself. Mm-hmm. So our job is, as Charlotte Mason would say, would be to set a beautiful feast for the child and let that child feast on these ideas. And as he's feasting, he's going to be making all these connections, and that connection is going to be permanent knowledge in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the way Charlotte Mason, and for me, it's how I really started to understand her philosophy. But I loved how she talked about children are persons, and we kind of think when you first hear that, you're like, well, yeah, of course, but no, they're
Right.
persons, they're unique persons that God has made, and they each have a mind, and the way that we educate our kids is to feed their minds with ideas. It's to put good ideas in front of them and let their minds feast on those. And yeah, I just love that picture, because then it really does start to open up this picture of what education is. And I pulled a quote from a book that I know you love too, Norms and Nobility. And
Yeah.
the author David Hicks um, kind of simplified the meaning of education from a Christian worldview in a short sentence, but then the book goes on to explain it more. But he says the supreme task of education is the cultivation of the human spirit, to teach the young to know what is good, to serve it above self, to reproduce it, to recognize that in knowledge lies this responsibility. And it's this same idea of recognizing the self of the child, the uniqueness,
Mm-hmm.
and then that education is really about cultivating our children's souls and their
Yeah.
minds, and it's not about a checklist of things that we check off and then we can say, okay, we educated for today. Um, that education is happening all the time, and maybe as parents we realize through this unique time where the schools are shut down, maybe we're starting to realize, well, actually, I've been teaching my kids in a lot of ways already all this time, and yeah, maybe not giving ourselves credit for what we were already doing with our kids. But yeah, that big idea of what education is, I think, does help. Um, it can help give us some peace in this time if your kid's
Yeah.
school has been shut down, that their education hasn't stopped. It won't
Mm-hmm.
stop, and that during this time, we can maybe start learning ourselves more about what true education is.
Yeah, Charlotte, a couple things come to
Yeah.
mind here. Number one, I love that Hicks quote
Yeah.
because he, once again, just like Charlotte Mason, he's talking about what happens in the child, not what do we do to cause this to happen. Because we can do some things, Charlotte Mason says, but they're not the things we typically think. One of the reasons our modern systems are built on information. So we have made the mistake of feeling like education is information. And so we try to stuff their heads with information, and kids don't see the value of that, because information apart from knowledge really isn't that helpful to us as human beings. That's not going to make us hungry for more. Charlotte Mason has a great thing where she said that facts and information are to the mind like sawdust is to the body. The mind has no organ to assimilate that. So if we want them to learn these facts, they need to be clothed in knowledge. They need to be clothed in narrative so that those things have a way of being assimilated into the body. Karen Glass breaks that down into an apple. You could give your child an apple by saying, and this is what modern education really does. It says, here's a few vitamins, here's some water, here's some sugar, here's some, all the things that go into some fiber, and you can take those one by one and absorb them and eat them. Or you could give your child the whole apple and say, here's an apple. And the question Karen Glass asks at the end of that is, which one would produce an appetite for more? If you had a whole scientific meal on the table with each element taken apart, you would never want to eat that meal again. But if you eat a whole meal that's beautifully prepared with good ingredients that have been put together, then you have a desire for more. And that's really the key to education, is that we want our children to desire more, and their mind is made by God and to desire to know. That's part of our God-given qualities. Now, there is a sense, like you're saying, the mind is going to go out and get knowledge one way or the other. It might not be your worksheet or your teachings, but we want something else for our children. We want them to desire what is good, and so we want to set the feast in such a way that we're doing what C.S. Lewis talks about, is ordering their affections. And ordering our own affections really is what we're doing. Just as this is what education is, the ordering of the affections. What do you love? There are shoulds. Charlotte Mason says there are shoulds. And those shoulds are the things that we should love. And when we don't love those things, we don't have to beat ourselves up, but we can say, what can I do to love what I should love?
Yeah, okay. I want to unpack what you're saying a little bit, especially for parents that maybe have never heard this kind of these kind of ideas before. So one thing that you said that I think is so important to realize as parents is that our kids are made with this desire to know things, to make connections. So oftentimes, they'll say, oh, my kids are bored by school lessons or whatever. And so then we can start to think like, oh, maybe kids don't really like to learn. But no, actually, they are born with this desire. And so really, that's where the feast comes in again. We're just feeding this natural desire that they have. Now, the desire can be snuffed out in a sense when sometimes then now they're associating learning means going to this place where I don't enjoy the lessons, or I'm on this, whatever they associate with school. So that can happen too. But okay, so this idea that our kids are born with this desire, this is natural to them to love to learn, to want to learn and make connections. So then let's unpack, if we can. I love Karen Glass's example of, do you break down the apple into all these little pieces and tell the child, here, this is an apple, enjoy it? Or do you just give them the apple and let them experience it first, and later on break down that apples have
Yeah,
fiber, that apples have all these things that come with them?
sure.
But what would that look like in say history, or some other example maybe that we could give parents of, this is putting the feast in front of them and not just shoving facts in, but putting something in front of them and allowing our kids to enjoy it.
Well, usually what that includes is using real books and not textbooks.
Yeah.
And there's two things. There's real living books, and there's what Charlotte Mason called narration, which is telling back.
Mm-hmm.
So really, those two things are the key to almost every subject, except for a few, math and even those subjects. The telling back of a problem that you is a way of saying, I know this problem, or I know this. So when you're going to approach history, instead of getting a history textbook out and just reading fact after fact after fact, which will not have a place to hook on to anything in your mind, and it will just be washed away.
Mm-hmm.
If you read them a narrative textbook, get a textbook, or get a book and read them real history. Read them about John Adams in books that people that love that time period were writing. David McCullough, or there's lots of children's books that cover all kinds of subjects in a very narrative fashion. Anything you can find that is, I know you can go to different places online where they have Charlotte Mason book lists, and Ambleside Online has Charlotte Mason. And see the idea that what kind of book would I read aloud, or have my child read to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then after they're reading these things, you're asking them, tell me what you read. And that's all there is to it. They read and they tell back. Mm-hmm. And that's how and that's what a life looks like. In an atmosphere where there's learning going on, you're having a wide and varied curriculum. So you're not spending all day on this subject, just grueling subject. You're doing some in a subject, and then you're moving on and reading some in another book, reading some in another book, maybe doing 15, 20 minutes of math. And you're keeping it varied, and nobody gets tired and nobody gets bored. And your home becomes a place of true learning. Things, not just learning because the test is coming, but learning because they're going to keep that the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and I think we can both attest to the fact that this type of learning works with kids, and we both have seen in our own children and other kids that this kind of learning, like you said, doesn't lead to boredom. It leads to more and more questions. So for example, like when you're reading, you want to learn about the Civil War, well, then learn about the Civil War by reading about Abraham Lincoln, by reading stories about Frederick Douglass, and reading these stories. And then the kids are learning about the time period. They'll learn all kinds of things just through these good books that we're reading to them, and they feel like they're knowing these people. And knowing someone's story means you learn all kinds of things about them, and maybe they don't know the exact date of something
Yes.
at first when they're first exposed to the Civil War. Like I remember my now 8-year-old, but when we were learning about the Civil War a couple years ago, and we were just immersed in all these stories and books, and some friends came over from out of town, and they walked up without the mom. And my little 5-year-old at the time said, "Where's your mom? Did she die in the Civil War?" So
Yes.
he was learning about the Civil War. He didn't really, I mean, he knew it happened a while ago, but all of that to say, he hadn't really made the date connection yet. But if you would have asked him things about that time, he would have known a lot about it. So, anyways, it's just, I thought at the time, and of course, I had to explain to them, I'm so sorry. We know your mother's not dead.
Yeah.
we're just really into this time in history right now, so he's excited about it. But yeah, so I think just the idea that we've seen this, and how this kind of learning awakens a child to love learning. And I think this leads to my next question that I'd love to talk about with you, Cindy. But you talked about the teachers, and how we've kind of set up this system where the teachers are the experts, and the parents are
Mm,
just kind of the side helpers at home with homework. Um, but the Bible really talks about parents as the primary educators of our kids. And
right.
um, so I'd love just to hear your thoughts on that as parents, how we should really view, even if we are sending our kids to a school for some hours during the day, which we both have done. How do we
Mhm.
as parents really keep this idea that we're the main educators of our kids in the forefront of our minds?
Well, first we understand that, like you said already, that learning is something going on all the time. It isn't something that happens because we go to school. So when we understand that, then we understand that we are a much bigger part of their lives than the school is, or and so that means that we have a much, and we've already, by the time a child is 6 or 7 years old, they've already learned so much from us. One thing is they've already learned so much about the world, even when we weren't trying to teach them. In some ways, and I want to say this very carefully, because I'm not talking about a child-centered education. That's not. It can sound like we're just saying just let the child do whatever he wants. No, we're saying give the child real food, real meat. You're going to prepare the food and give that to them, but we're not going to misunderstand that it's the child who has to digest that food.
Mm-hmm.
We often try to digest the food for our children, and that isn't, that it doesn't, it's just yuck. Who wants
Yeah,
that?
you've
I
you've
mean,
given good examples of that before, Cindy. I've heard you talk about, but give some example of. I know you've talked about it like with your Bible teaching with your boys, and just
oh yes. Yes. So you want to present the true, the good, the beautiful through these things like the Bible, for instance, but you don't want to belabor the moral lessons in that. Mom, the Bible speaks for itself. We honor God's word in our home. We give it a place of primacy. We read it, and we even discuss it for the fun of, just because we love it. But mom or dad or whoever isn't going to pound the Bible into the family. Now, I say that if any of my kids are watching this, they would be like, my older kids especially, what? Why is she saying this? Because that's exactly what she did. She pounded, and that is what I did. Of course, that's how I learned that that is not the best way um, to present the Bible. The Bible, if we trust, it's almost like when we pound it in, we're saying, I'm afraid this isn't true. I've got to make sure
Mhm.
that it is.
Mhm.
And when we trust the Bible and we read it and we hand it to our children as is, then they understand that it's something that is trustworthy, and that it doesn't need mom to say, don't miss this, don't miss this. We don't want to, because for one thing, when we have really little kids, they'll listen to that, and it'll appear like, well, we're just doing a great job with that. But as they get older, all you've done is taught them how not to listen to you,
Mhm.
and turn off what you're saying, and you're doing that with the most important thing on the face of the earth. So it would be better to light-handedly just present the Bible and let it do the work in the child's life.
Mhm.
It's for itself, and every subject really is like that.
Yeah, and you brought up the idea of narration, which Charlotte Mason talked about is so important in the life of a child, to learn this art of narration. But this is where we can, I think, help ourselves to not be so preachy about things, or go into this mode of, now what did we learn from this? And instead of just reading to our kids or presenting some food, some idea to them, and then just discussing that idea. So, for example, reading a Bible, a section from the Bible, and not not giving the trivial, now what do we learn from this, or what lesson can we pull from this, and just maybe saying, what did you notice about this, and maybe in a real way just saying, as a person with them, reading with them, there's been many times where I've said to the kids, wow, I never noticed this before. I don't remember Jesus saying this before, and this is really, wow, this is really making me think about this. That's different, because then I'm just
Right.
coming along learning with them than saying, now, kids, do you see this? This is something you
Right.
need to work on, or
Yes.
this is something mom would like us to all do in our home. So
Yeah.
yeah, in that way, just allowing the kids and really modeling too, I think that we're learning along with them.
Well, you're like a brother and sister in Christ with them when you're doing
Hmm.
that. You're not, lording the Bible over them or using it as a tool against them.
Hmm.
And that's really the distinction. Yes, there are times when we say, you know what, this is the Bible. I felt very convicted by that today. That really hit me hard, and that's fine. Of course, if you're doing that every day, like every day, mom's going to say, "This is what I got out of the passage." That is the danger. I
Yes.
always used to say I would have enjoyed being a preacher. I was really into doing that for a while, and then I realized one day I just looked up one day and saw the glazed eyes. And or maybe the Holy Spirit showed me that, because I started, number one, I stopped doing that to the best ability. Number two, I started telling other moms to stop doing it. I could tell somebody not to do something. My kids won't listen to me. But, I could look to the people coming behind and say, oh, yeah, don't make that mistake.
Hmm. Yeah, and I hope this is an encouragement to parents to hear you say, I mean, if I don't remember if we said in the introduction, if you don't know Cindy, she has 9 children, 8 of them are boys. They're all out of the house now. How many grandkids are you up to now, Cindy? I know you just had a new one.
Well, we're right now we're at 6 and 6, girl, boy,
Oh,
and we have a tiebreaker in the works. So we're excited about that. In November, we'll know. Well, we might know before then what the tie breaking baby will be.
so 12, almost 13 grandkids at the
Yeah.
moment. So you have learned so much as a parent, just by making mistakes and then
Oh,
learning from those mistakes. And so I hope parents hear that and are encouraged in that. I know, as the mom of 5 kids and a grandma of 2 so far, for me, often we learn so much just from our mistakes of trying something and then realizing this is not working, and being honest,
so,
I think, even with our kids sometimes, of saying, you know what, I realized I haven't been doing this right, or I realize I've been really hard on you guys, or whatever the situation is. But we learn so much from our mistakes. So it's nice, I know, to hear from a veteran mom like you that, oh no, I kind of screwed up with the first couple of kids doing doing
well, I always
Bible.
when I was doing when I was doing a talk once on things I did right, things I did wrong, it really brought me up short, because I realized all the things that I did right were things I fell into accidentally. And all the things I did wrong were the things I was doing on purpose. I thought that was the way to do it. So life is hard. Life is hard, and homeschooling, mom can feel a lot of responsibility, and it's not an easy road for mom. It's a lot easier to say, you know what, I'm just going to send them to school and let someone else take the fall for this mess. And mom has to, face up to that. Sometimes it can be difficult, but you have to, if you really understand, if you really have a strong feeling and you understand what it is to learn and what it is, what education really could be,
Mm-hmm.
then you have a lot more courage to go about doing what you're doing with your kids. And hopefully, if you listen to some of the moms who made mistakes before you, then you have a benefit of not making the same mistakes they made. Even if that's our only purpose, then that's still encouraging to me, that I can at least warn people, oh, don't do that. That's not the best thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and really that's why we're here, right? To not to come
Yeah.
across as hey, we're homeschooling moms, so we figured it all out, and you can learn from all the great things we do. It's I mean, I asked you to do this mostly because I know who you are, and I know that both of us have learned some things as we've been educating our kids at home. And so
Yeah.
for parents who this is a different time, and maybe they are for the first time really seeing this is kind of what a daily life at school is looking like for their kids, and maybe thinking, I don't think this is really, my kid seems really bored by this stuff, or this seems really
Right.
frustrating for them, and and then maybe thinking about this kind of thing for the first time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so thinking about actually all the changes um, in education right now for kids. I know we talked a little bit before about what you would um, encourage parents in this time now that they are home. So, for example, we talked about how I I've heard many different stories. You have too. I know some people, their kids are having to be on Zoom calls um,
Mm-hmm.
several times a day. For junior high schoolers, it's sometimes 5 Zoom calls with different teachers every day. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I heard a story of a kindergartner who has to be on Zoom every morning at 8:30 and then at 9:30, and the teacher's going through different lessons, and um or parents I know are also, some are just sending home a packet of things on Monday and that has to all be turned in on Friday. Um so trying to figure out how to do this, of course, at home is quite different actually, than what you and I have done and are doing in my case still when it comes to homeschooling. So in some senses, I've said to people, well, I think what you're doing is harder because I get to decide what we do at home, and you're being told these things to do at
Right.
home.
Oh,
And
sure. Much harder.
yeah, and two, it's just been kind of thrust on them all of a sudden. So, the school year was 3/4 of the way done, and then these parents are being sent home books and things that they're just having to jump into 3/4 of the way in, which I can't
Right.
even imagine. I mean, that would be so difficult for the
Oh, yeah.
parent. The thing the parent has going for them, though, I think, is that they know their child, and that's
Mm.
so important, and more important than knowing the material, I think, when it comes to educating our kids. But so taking these situations that these parents are in, would you have any encouragement in how to, well, as we were talking, you said, well, I might do this if I was a parent, maybe kind of push off some of these things that are being sent home. But what thoughts do you have on that?
Well, I did. There was a girl recently who asked. She said, I'm thinking of just keeping my children home next year. Some people are paying a lot of tuition, and they're like, if this is going to go on another year, I'd just rather not pay the tuition, and I would rather just do this at home. But she said, I want something accredited so that I can keep my child on track when they go back to
Mm,
school. Well, that is assuming there is this track,
mm,
and if you and that you can somehow, that if you stay on that same track, they'll know the same things that they're supposed to know. When really there actually is such a thing as stopping. We don't learn in a linear fashion. Learning is something that kind of happens stop and start. You learn a lot, and then you assimilate. You learn a lot, and then you assimilate. And when the train just keeps chugging along, then their child is a lot of children are missing a lot as that train is chugging along. If you get off the train and you just let everybody assimilate, maybe take a couple weeks off, let everybody just get where they are, and then start bringing in some living learning, and if that mom did that for a year, she would probably find when she went to send the kids back to school, which is what her worry was, that they were not behind, and in fact they might even be ahead.
mm.
It doesn't. It's not as hard as we think it is. It is hard if you're gonna. Oh, I have to keep plugging along, plugging along, plugging along. That's very difficult because that isn't how we learn. So our children are going to be resistant, and they're going to not be able to handle that chug, 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 chug every day in the same old way, the same old worksheet, the same way of doing it. And their minds are not being activated in that, so it's very difficult. But I don't think there's a fear. Let's say they go to school and they are behind. How long do you think it would take them to catch back up? Hardly any time at all. Even if they missed a year of school and you didn't do anything and they went back to school, if they're bright children or even just normal children, they're not going to. It's not going to take them that long to catch up. It just isn't.
Yeah.
So I would say you do have the ability to chill a little bit. You do have the time to let go and let everybody assimilate what they've learned already and then pick things back up. You have time for that.
Yeah, I think that's so good. And just the idea of a standard. So second grade, you're supposed to know all of these things, and then they might get behind. I think is a concern that a lot of parents have. And I know with my oldest daughter, we never did homeschool, but we did mostly public school and some private. And one time we moved from one state to another, and when I was meeting with her new teacher, she said, "Oh, you're from this state. Well, in this state, we have these standards, so she's going to be quite behind." And I thought, well, okay, I'm sure she'll catch up, and sure enough, she did. But for me, that experience opened my eyes to the fact that even what some states considered to be standards or expectations of third graders or second is different from state to state. And so I started to think, it kind of seems like all of these measures are so subjective, even within a state. Some school districts do things differently. So I think that's good to think about as parents, and this whole falling behind idea. I think if we can let go of that a little bit and realize that we are the authority, we know our children. This is a strange time, especially I've been thinking so much about a family who's going through a crisis right now, either, mostly, I think, losing jobs. I mean, there's 25 million in unemployment, and even more that couldn't apply for unemployment. So, there's millions of families now that have lost jobs and are facing financial worries. And that can weigh on parents so much, obviously, and then on the family. And I just think if this is weighing on the parents, and then they're trying to check all these boxes for all these different teachers for their kids, that seems like a recipe for disaster.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I think what you said about just taking a couple weeks off of, especially if your family is going through a hard time, and just regrouping as a family. We know our family better than any teacher, better than any friend. We know our family. And if life is crazy, it's better to simplify and have quiet mornings together in prayer and reading, and reminding our kids and ourselves that God's with us, that we can trust God even through hard things, rather than trying to shove in all these lessons every day.
Well, there's no such thing as a person being behind in learning.
Yes.
Every person is right where we all are as learners, and hopefully we're all learners, is where we are today. Nobody is behind. I'm not ahead of you. I'm not behind you. I'm where I am, and I've got to start learning right here. This is today. What I'm going to learn today is going to start with what I don't know. And you're going to be doing the same thing, and your children are doing the same thing every day. We're all we're all at the same point of where we don't know something. So a lot of times the system makes us feel like I don't know is a point of failure, when it's really the very point of the beginning of it all. It's a wonderful place to be when you don't know something. You get to learn that. I mean, there's things I learned that I had so much fun learning that I wish I could go back and not know them again, so I could have that fun experience of learning them. So there's that point too, which is a little side point to that.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I think both of us would say that the part of the joy of taking on the academic education of our kids, as well as all the other areas of education, has been the fun that we have had in learning with them.
yes.
Yeah, I could just think of a million stories of where I have been just as excited or more so than the kids about what we're reading or what we're doing, and that has been just for me one of the great joys of taking on learning as a family, um, rather than breaking it up, doing all these different grades and sending them to different schools or places or whatever, but really just saying we're going to learn together as a family. Um, which I think we're going to move into some practical things. And are you going to come in with questions? Okay, so we want to move to the practical, and I think Brett's been looking. Oh, I need to give you an ear pod.
We can share because we're married.
We don't have the social distance.
Okay, I'm gonna come into the middle of this conversation. I was actually just sitting there, just kind of soaking up all that you guys were saying. It was so good. But there are some questions, and I want to leave some time for some questions here. Before we get to taking some of your questions, and if you are watching right now on the YouTube live stream feed, just type your questions into the chat box there. If you're watching on Facebook, I'm also checking Facebook, so you can put them in there as well. But a couple of things. I did mention at the beginning of the live stream, I want to mention it again. We actually have some copies of some of Cindy's books. This is one book, Mere Motherhood, that you can get on Amazon. And the Amazon link is in the description on the YouTube video. But we're going to give these away. And I said at the beginning, if you go to the maventruth.com website, go to our website, maventruth.com, and scroll to the bottom, sign up for the Maven email resource list, where we send out free resources and just all kinds of things to help you out as parents. If you sign up for that, we will use those signups as our drawing. And so I'm just going to let you know that, let's see, let's just choose randomly here. Okay, Laura Sharda won this book right here, Mere Motherhood. So we're going to send it out. We'll contact you, get your address, and we'll mail that out to you, Laura. So if you want to get in on the drawing for some of Cindy's books, and hey, maybe we'll give away a Maven T-shirt. All right.
Let me tell the people who are here from my email list and things like that. Maven Truth, I am just so excited about Maven because of what they're doing. I'm kind of getting older, and I'm not facing those new modern problems that I never had to face, all the technology, everything that's happening in our culture. But you guys are taking those things head on, and it's so nice for me to say, I don't know, but I can point people to you because you guys are doing that hard work. And you've written the book, The Practical Guide to Culture. And you guys didn't ask me to say this, but I really want my people to know that don't be afraid of signing up for their email list. You will be so happy that you have those resources for parenting in the modern world.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks, Cindy. I couldn't agree with you more. Okay, so a couple of other just resources. One thing that we love to do at Maven is to point people to other resources and other allies, because there's only so much one organization or ministry can do. Of course, you can go to cindyrollins.net and find her resources there. In fact, her handbook to Morning Time, which was a second book she wrote, you can get actually a free digital copy of that, I believe, if you go to our website. So check out our website there. For those of you who have older kids, in fact, Erin mentioned she's got grandkids. That's crazy. You're a grandma.
And
Congratulations.
you have grandkids too.
Yeah, so that means we have some older kids, and some of you out there are wondering, like, okay, well, what do I do with some of my older kids? Maybe
Mhm.
they're beyond me homeschooling them. Maybe they're in college or what have you. There are some great ministries out there. In fact, one of them is one of a ministry that I do a lot of work with, Summit Ministries. And Summit Ministries has actually just put together a 5-day video course, a virtual training and curriculum for students who are 16, high school, 16 years old, and to 25 years old, so high school through college. And if you just go to summit.org and click on their conferences, you'll get information about that. So check out that resource. That's a great opportunity. As events and camps and conferences get canceled,
Mhm.
students can get on, and you can help equip your kids with the truth by going to summit.org and sign up for their virtual summit. Okay, all right, let's get to some questions. And while you're watching, hey, continue to ask more questions. But I want to go to a couple of questions that came in early on. This is from the Armendariz family, I believe. The question was, there was some conversation about knowledge and information, and they asked the question, what would you say is the difference between information and knowledge? So I'll throw that to Cindy first. Cindy, why don't you jump in on that one?
Well, in a way, it's kind of need to know. When we need to know something, we learn it. And when we read narrative, when we read a narrative story or a narrative history or a narrative geography, we're getting this. That our mind is feeding on knowledge. If let's say we have this other situation going where I want my 3-year-old. I saw this on actually on a TV show my mom showed me. A little 3-year-old knew all the bones in the body, and he got up and he was adorable and he went through every bone in the body. That was information, that was factual.
Mhm.
Well, one thing I can tell you about that 3-year-old, having lived life as long as I have, he will not be a doctor someday. Those facts
Mhm.
are not producing in him it's cute, it's adorable, it's a trick, and almost any 3-year-old can do something similar, but that is a fact that is not hitched onto his body, in his mind, in any way. So we sometimes we think, especially in the classical school movement, homeschooling movement, there's this idea that if we just pile our head full of facts, then somehow we'll be smarter than everybody else, and that's what classical education is. Well, if you actually go all the way back to Aristotle and Plato, they had no interest in facts at all. They were always interested in ideas. So ideas are what the mind feeds on. The mind does not feed on facts. Now, when we have a need to know facts, like say we're in med school and we need to know the bones of the body, then we have this thing of memory that we can use to memorize those facts, but they're in context of what we need to know at that time. If we try to do that divorced from meaning, it's really, I actually feel it's very dangerous to teach children to memorize things that have nothing connected in their life to that. They're just memorize. For one thing, a very key part of education is humility. That's when I said we all start education at the I don't know. That's because that's where humility is. All education begins with humility. If I don't know something, I can't learn it. So when we teach our children to rattle off facts, and we're all proud of them and we show everybody we know what our children can do, well, what are we developing in them? We're telling our child, you know something, when they absolutely know nothing. And we're blocking the door for them to go through to real knowledge, because now they think they have something that they don't really have. So that's why this is such an important distinction.
Yeah, I think the information, the facts are things that I think we all probably know or can think of times in our own lives where there's been things we've had to learn to cram for a test or whatever. I know that's kind of my story of education. I feel like as a child, I just kind of learned what I had to get to the next grade. But then when I left, and when I reflect on my own education, I think, gosh, I didn't learn anything. And it's why it's been fun to learn new things with my kids, because I didn't remember those things. I didn't retain it. So it wasn't really knowledge. I was just learning facts and like that 3-year-old just chiming off things. But yeah, that 3-year-old has they don't have a knowledge of the human body. They've just memorized some things, which little kids are good at doing, but they don't have a connection. They haven't made a connection to the human body, which is different than a medical student, like you said, who's learning for a test. But this medical student has learned all this stuff about the human body, so they're making all kinds of connections. And this is knowledge that they're going to retain, as opposed to the 3-year-old, by the time they're 5 or 6, is going to forget all of that and really have no use for it. We don't have a use for it, so we'll just forget it anyways. And so that's not knowledge. It's just information that doesn't really matter to us.
All right, I'm going to jump in with another question. We're getting some great questions here. This comes from Mariah. She says, I'm having incredible difficult time feeding the desire in math with my children. It seems to always just come down to breaking down the apple. Any advice here? Erin, you want to, what advice would you give on
Yeah, math can be, well, some kids seem to have a natural desire to love math and to see the beauty in math, and some have a harder time seeing the beauty of it. I'm one of those, to be honest. But I think I've had conversations with my kids about the importance of math, that math is actually just studying the universe. It's seeing how God made the universe and figuring out those patterns, and how it's so neat when we do discover things about the universe, and math is one of those things that we discover. I think in just a real practical way, if math is your child's least favorite thing to do, I would probably bump that to earlier in the morning rather than later in the day when they're tired and don't want to do something. And so if it is a challenging thing, that we care for the child, and that we give it to them, we help them to teach it to them at a time where they're at their best, which typically for children is earlier in the morning. And I would even communicate, listen, I know math isn't your favorite thing, but it's still a thing that we have to learn, because it's so important as followers of Christ to have knowledge about God's world. And so we're going to keep doing math, but I'm going to try to help you in it. So I'll set a timer, and we'll only do it for 15, 20 minutes a day. We'll do it first thing, so we'll get it done. We'll do our work and then play later. So that would be my advice. But Cindy, what else would you say about the math question?
I think what you said at the end was very good. I think what I would do with the child is, number one, most kids just have a breakdown. They think they can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more important that they have a tiny victory in math today than that they get through this whole lesson. So the more little victories that we can pile up on math, the more confident they'll become. And so that's when we have to be brave enough not to feel like we have to stay on this train, because they're going to get ahead. They might skip 7 stations eventually if you just stop what you're doing and let them have some victories and don't go beyond that. Do 10, 15 minutes of math at a time, and then that's it. You're not going to do any more until maybe you might have to do that a couple times a day, but hit it at a different time. I agree with you about the early morning being very good. We always did our math first thing. But I definitely think that doing less math better is more beneficial.
Yeah.
And letting the child see that it's just not, they see a page of problems and they just feel despair. But if they see one problem, well, okay, let me do this problem.
Yeah.
And then do this problem now,
Yeah, and I think I'm just thinking about math, and if they were in a public school and bringing that math now home, it's most likely Common Core math, which is a whole nother issue. So I think what you just said about learning it is more important necessarily than just checking off the box. So maybe if you see the Common Core curriculum and you realize what it's trying to teach, but maybe not in such a good way, why not, instead of the worksheet, use Play-Doh or counting beans or something else to teach the child the concept without the worksheet? Maybe just take away the worksheets altogether and teach them the ideas of math, but doing it in a way that's respectful of the child and is, and I think for especially for young ones, the way to respect a child is to use things that they can touch and feel and count and see, and that can spark a love for math, um, because you took away the worksheet and actually showed them what it means in real life, which is quite different than maybe what you're being sent home to do.
Um, yeah, and look, for Mariah and all the parents out there who worry about their kids who struggle with math or don't love math, I'm one of those kids. I still struggle with math, and I think one of the biggest things that's been helpful for me is seeing how it connects with the larger world. Now, it's not just about answering this math problem on this worksheet, but really helping to integrate the Christian worldview, that there's a Christian view of mathematics and how it makes sense of the world. Um, okay, ladies, this is a question. It's kind of a two-parter, and it has a math component to it as well, so I want to ask this. But a question from Jennifer. Talk about the Charlotte Mason method and high school. And then specifically, how much time is enough to adequately cover the mechanics of higher level math? So kind of a two-parter. I think for some people who maybe don't have some background on Charlotte Mason, and particularly the Charlotte Mason method with high school, I'll throw this out to Cindy. Cindy, what would you say about that?
Well, as far as the Charlotte Mason High School, you're gonna I'm not even sure I can get this out, because what a lot of people approach high school with a lot of fear. I kind of decided right at the very beginning that, you know what, this had been working so far. I didn't want to start doing what all of a sudden in high school now I'm supposed to switch over and do everything the way the modern school does it. And I decided, since I was homeschooling, now if they were in school, my one son went to school and he had to do that. And now I have the comparison. What did my one son do in public high school, and what did we do at home? Did he learn more Spanish in 2 years of high school Spanish than we learned pretending to do Spanish at home? No, not really. We both did badly at Spanish, the public school and Alex. But he likes Spanish. He still likes Spanish. There are. I feel like parents will benefit, number one, in the writing skills of children. If a child in high school is writing every single day a reading journal or a written narration of college ruled page long written narration, and even if that was the only writing you did with that child for all of high school, you will be surprised at how well they do in college writing. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we think this format writing is the important thing, and we actually ruin our children's writing when we do this heavily formatted writing. We teach them to add adverbs, to add adjectives. We actually are spending 4 years of high school teaching our children to write badly, when all they have to do when they get to college is take all this knowledge they've been having during their high school years and all along. They've filled their mind with these things, and they've been writing every day, so they know how to get it out of their head onto the paper, and then they have to learn. So say you fail to teach the format at all of their high school. They go to college, and a week into college, they figured that format out because it's not that hard. Mm-hmm. But they have something that all the other students don't have, and I've seen this over and over again. They have the ability to have thoughts on paper. And their professors absolutely love this. Mm-hmm. They can bring in Shakespeare and Plutarch and literature, Mark Twain, and whatever you're reading, and they can bring all of that to these papers. Mm-hmm. And it's so rich. So number one, you just keep doing what you're doing. You give them a very broad, wide, rich reading curriculum so that they're reading and reading and reading a lot of real books. A high school student can maybe read 3, 4, 5 hours a day. They do some math, they do some science, and they can, if you want to have them do some other subjects on their own or online or whatever. Like I know your son, he does debate. What does he have any other special interests besides that?
Yeah, well, debate's a big one, but yeah, he likes to do film, and he loves to read philosophy, so that's kind of. So yeah, we try to let that be a big part of his curriculum. Our son's a senior this year, so this semester, yeah, he's read a ton of philosophy because he's wanted to. He's really dove into debate and things like that. So yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, Cindy. And as far as specific math curriculums, for high school, there with a couple of my kids, I've done where they've taken a math class from a teacher who was really good at algebra, and I had a terrible algebra teacher in high school. So I was so intimidated when high school was coming with my kids because I'm thinking, I didn't have good teaching in math when I was in high school. So sometimes it might be a time where you find a good teacher that they take a class with or whatever. So you don't necessarily have to be afraid of that. But Cindy already mentioned Ambleside Online, and they are just a wealth of resource of just the different year breakdowns and ideas of things to do for math. So if you're looking for math ideas in particular, I think go to Ambleside, and then everything you just said, Cindy, about the overall high school years. I think it's so true. There's so much fear about it. Like, oh, okay, we've done homeschooling with our kids these years, but that's okay if you mess them up when they're little. But now it's serious, like they're in high school. You can't mess around
Well,
anymore.
the transcript comes up a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and here's the thing: that the system has a language, and we did this with our kids. So we have to translate what we have done with our children into their language.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to do it the way the system was doing it. We just have to say, yeah, we spent this time on this subject, and that's this credit. And as long as your child so the transcript is really just a piece of paper. And I found this out very early with my oldest son when I was agonizing over the transcript. Did he do this? Did he do that? And he had a guy look at his transcript and said, well, he doesn't have an American history credit for high school. And I said, oh, he knew so much American history we didn't want to waste time on anymore. We just wanted to delve into some ancient history and some other things. And he said, well, he said he has to have a credit. And I said, well, he knows, I can guarantee he knows more American history. I mean, if you talk to this kid today, he's 35 years old, he knows a ton of American history because he cared. He did it on his own. He loved it. He said, well, could you just check the American history box for me? That way we can get through with this. I'm like, if based on what he knows, I can check that box. And that it was a box to check. Mm-hmm. And as long as you're not inflating things for your own ego, if you're just truly representing what your children were doing in high school, I gave a fine arts credit for 4 years of morning time, composer, artist. Those were things we did for 4 years. That was a fine arts credit at the end of high school. That wasn't me figuring out, they did this, you just have to look at it as a language that has to be translated.
I think that's so good for Christian parents to hear is and to remember to put all of the kind of the requirements and the box checking into this larger perspective of what is education, what is our view of education, and that we want to develop a Christian view of education and not just be socialized by the culture around us and absorb what the culture tells us we ought to do. Now, sometimes you need to check those boxes to, for very practical reasons, but always keeping it in perspective. All right, so here is a big question that we hear a lot of people asking at this point who find themselves homeschooling maybe for the first time. But here's the question, and I want you both to weigh in on this. I'd like some help on this one. How do you manage having kids at different ages? So you might have the high schooler and the third grader, or the fifth grader and the kindergartner and the baby all at home at the same time. How do parents manage this? Erin, we'll start with you, and then we'll kick it over to Cindy.
I wanted you to start with Cindy.
I didn't.
Okay, this is a good question, and this maybe is where we can say, okay, we've had to juggle this and figure it out too, and that's one thing I've noticed about homeschooling is every year looks a little different because depending on if you add a baby or now the baby's a toddler and now the toddler's getting into everything or you have a preschooler. So this can be a hard thing to manage, and this is where I think as a parent, I would take some of the authority of your home back from what you're being told to do. And this is, I think, one of the main reasons why, because you are a family, and being together as a family is the way God designed it to be. And so having people of different ages isn't a problem. It's actually how God's designed the family to be. And so oftentimes when the problem with kids being broken up by age and grade for most of their lives is they can start, the relational breakdown can happen between siblings because they're used to being told, well, you go with your age and you go with your age, and they don't learn to live together in harmony, because the system that they're in. So now they're at home. So I would use this opportunity to say, we're a family. We're going to do things together as much as we can as a family. And so this is where, if you don't have Cindy's book, Mere Motherhood, I would get that, because she talks so much about what she did in morning time. And morning time, and we practice this now too because of Cindy, is just bringing the family together to learn. And it's our prayer time, it's our Bible time, but it's also time where we read together, we read poetry together, we do all kinds of things. So I would say, as much as you can do as a family, do it as a family. And yeah, you might have to have separate time for math. Your second grader and your fourth grader are going to be in different places, but you can read together, most things, and you can do a lot of your day together. And then when you need to have time where you're focused on one child as opposed to another, I think, having times, I've done all different things through the years, but sometimes I've had schedules where I've assigned older kids with younger kids. And
I did that.
you did that too? So I've had times where it's like, I need to work with kid number 3. So kid number 1 and kid number 4, you're together, and kid number 1, you're in charge of number 4, and you have 30 minutes to do something fun together, and you get to decide what it is, but I need this time with kid number 3. And so you can do that. And that's especially effective. There have been years where I've realized kids needed, more practice reading aloud, and that was maybe a struggle of theirs. So I would say, okay, during this time while I'm busy, you go ahead and read to the little one, and they're working on this skill that you want them to work on, and they're occupying a little one while you're trying to do something else. So there's things like that that can help on a real practical level. I think about, we, for 11 years, we lived in a 2-bedroom place with 5 kids, and well, not all that time. We added kids during those years, but so we had babies, toddlers. We're in a 2-bedroom place, and living there made Brett and I realize that we had too much stuff. And I think most American families have too much stuff. And so what I started to do is I would put toys away, and then on Mondays, when I needed time with my 8-year-old to do something, I would pull out the toys that I had now stuck away, maybe the Lincoln Logs or something. And that was kind of our Monday toy. And so when you pull it out, when things have been put away, it's as if they're brand new. And because often what we do is we just have all these toys out all the time. And so you don't have to go buy new stuff, just hide some of the stuff you have that they maybe aren't playing with anymore. And then use that as a resource when you need time, you need them to be occupied doing something, and they're 3, so you can't just let them outside by themselves. So and just on a real practical level, that was something I did, and putting the matchbooks cards away, and then pulling them out every Wednesday. My son was looking forward to Wednesdays because then he got to play with the cars that he'd kind of forgotten about. So anyway, that's a long answer,
Okay,
but Cindy.
before I have Cindy weigh in on that
Oh
one,
yes.
just want to let people know, hey,
Oh yeah.
Cindy's got a great book called A Handbook to Morning Time. We've got actually a hard copy here, and like I said, we're giving away several copies of Cindy's books and resources. So all you got to do is, and we'll extend this, I think, throughout the entire day today. So even if you're watching the recording of this, go ahead, if you sign up for the Maven email list at our website, maventruth.com, scroll to the bottom, sign up for our email list, and we will, throughout the day, choose just random names from the signups, and we will send you guys out some free resources. So this is one resource, and I'm actually going to go ahead and choose somebody who's already signed up, and so I'm going to choose Fawn Welker. So we're gonna send this out to Fawn Welker, one of Cindy's great resources. It has a lot of practical ideas. Okay, Cindy, we want you to weigh in on this as well. How did you manage kids at different ages with homeschooling?
Yeah, that was so I think at the peak of my homeschooling, I had 7 in school, in homeschool, and a baby and a toddler. And then after that, it started going down a little bit, it went the other way. And then whoosh, I'll tell you this, when it goes up fast, it goes down fast too. So when you reach that peak, hold on, because they're going to grow up, boom, 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 boom. And then you're going to be all alone in a COVID virus by yourself in your house. And it's fun. But, somebody asked me the other day a question, when should you start sentence diagramming with your children? And you know what I told them? Because we did sentence diagramming in morning time, we just did 1 sentence a day, 2 minutes at max, 2-3 minutes at max. I said, ultimately, when they're a baby, when your baby is sitting, I think about my little Christopher, who just had a baby, he himself. We were having morning time together, and he was an infant, and he was a part of it. And his whole entire life, he went to morning time. Mm-hmm. And I think he might have been the very first baby I had when we were full swing into morning time. Mm-hmm. I think, or maybe Nathaniel, my other baby. And now I have morning time online during this virus with my granddaughters. Mm-hmm. So when you have a large family, you're going to have to do things differently. No, my mom used to say, I don't know how you do it. And I'd be like, the reason you don't know how I'm doing it is because I'm not doing it the way you think it should be done. Mm-hmm. The way you imagine that I'm doing it, I couldn't do that. Mm-hmm. That would be impossible to do that. Mm-hmm. So I had to make adjustments to how we went about things. I think Ambleside Online has a part called Ambleside for Groups. I was like you, Erin. I did as much as we could together. And then as your children are able to read and do things on their own, then they would have a list to work through for the things that they weren't doing with us as a group. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was like a one-room schoolhouse. Right now I'm reading to my granddaughters a book called Understood Betsy.
Oh, I love that.
By Dorothy Canfield. Mm-hmm. And if you read that book out loud or read it to yourself even, it'll really give you an idea of some of the things we've been talking about today, the difference between the system and the reality of how we learn. Mm-hmm. Betsy, the whole book is about that, and it's so wonderful. But that is really, you have to be brave, like Erin is saying, and saying, I have a large family, so I'm going to have to arrange things differently than this linear, systematic fashion that other people. But you can do that. It can be done, and there's a lot of benefits. There's benefits to having an only child and putting all your efforts onto that child. Yes, the moms with a large family think, if only I had this one child, I could get this right. But the moms with there are benefits to having a lot of children and having them each here. I mean, it's a wonderful moment when you're reading Winnie the Pooh to your 7, 5, and 3-year-old, and your 16-year-old calls out, I love that book. You guys, wait, this is going to come up. You have a family culture built around these books that is going to bind your family together. So really, I think it's a plus in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that just happened. We're in Farmer Boy with my 8 and 12-year-old. We're reading that right now. But my 18-year-old came by us yesterday as we were reading, and he listened for a little bit, and then he was like, I love this part. And I just loved that he knew it, and that, we can share these things together. So and that's what learning, that's why sometimes those of us with larger families learn these things that I think are good principles that can be applied in all families, and as much learning together as you can do is so great, because then the kids make connections with each other over what they're learning too, which is, it just adds a richness to your family and a connectedness too.
All right.
I got,
Go ahead, Cindy.
let me add one
Yeah.
thing. I got kind of brave with a lot of these things because we didn't have a lot of money with so many kids. So I learned through not having money, I couldn't buy the things I thought I really needed. Now I look back and think, oh, that was a gift that God gave me. It's the time it didn't seem like it, but because of that, I learned that these things do work apart from the system.
Yeah.
Well, Erin and Cindy, thank you so much for this conversation. For those of you who tuned in, thank you. Let me say a couple of things here before we wrap this up. If you enjoyed this, if you found it helpful, please leave us a comment, a message. If you would like us to do future live streams on these kinds of topics, let us know what kind of topics you're interested in, or what questions you have, or what kind of help you need, and we will do future events like this to really help come alongside you and equip you to really disciple your kids and help form your kids. Again, for those of you who want some additional resources, right? Because there's only so much you can accomplish in an hour and a half live stream, especially when you have the first 15 minutes of technical difficulties. But if you want some good follow-up resources after this, of course, number one, get on Amazon, pick up Cindy's book, you moms out there, Mere Motherhood, and that's available on Amazon. Also, for those of you who listen to podcasts, Erin and I do a parent podcast through Maven, which you can go to our website, maventruth.com, find the podcast there. You can find it on Apple iTunes podcasts. You can find it on Google Play, and we encourage you to use the podcast as a resource. Also, what I will do is I will take a lot of these things that we've mentioned, the different resources, the websites, and we will link those in the description so that you'll have an easy kind of place to find all of that.
I wanted to mention too, just real quick, for the moms out there, if you are wanting to be fed this summer with ideas for your mind, because moms are persons too, Cindy does a morning time with moms through the month of June and a little bit into July. And so go on her website, and I think you guys meet once a week, right, Cindy?
We have a Facebook page, so we're together pretty much every day for those 30. It's a 30-day reading list. We read, we talk. I'm going to have some special guests. Karen Glass is going to help us out.
Oh, yeah.
And once a week, we'll meet on Zoom and talk.
Yeah. So moms, if you're wanting to be encouraged and fed this summer, I would definitely recommend signing up for that too.
All right, for those of you out there who want to be informed and you want to know when we do our next live stream and what resources are out there, sign up for our email list at maventruth.com, and we will let you know of future events like this. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to Erin and Cindy for taking your time out and sharing your wisdom with us. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next live stream.